The German shepherd refused to leave the grave. For 3 hours, Ranger stood guard over fresh dirt in the abandoned cemetery, whimpering at something his master couldn't see. When Tom Sullivan finally gave in and started digging with his flashlight cutting through the darkness, 6 inches down his fingers touched something that made his blood freeze. A hand, still warm, still moving. Tom's heart hammered against his ribs as he pulled harder, mud flying, his 68-year-old body screaming in protest. A woman's face emerged, gasping, eyes rolling white with terror. It was Claire Parker, the town nurse, missing for 8 hours. She whispered before passing out, her voice barely audible above the rising wind. "He's still watching." Tom spun around, his detective instincts roaring back to life after 3 years of retirement. Through the Spanish moss and shadows, he saw a figure disappearing into the bayou. Ranger growled, muscles coiled, ready to chase. Hurricane warning sirens began wailing in the distance. The storm was 6 hours away. Tom had to decide now. Stay with the dying woman or chase the kidnapper into the darkness. Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments, along with the city you're watching from now. Let's continue with the story. Thomas Sullivan had been many things in his 68 years. A decorated police officer, a devoted husband, a man who believed in justice with the kind of conviction that came from seeing too much evil in the world. But now, 3 years into retirement, he was mostly just tired and alone, except for the dog lying beside him on the worn porch of his rented house on the edge of Cypress Bend, Louisiana. The house was small, barely more than a shack really, with peeling paint and a roof that leaked when it rained hard. But it was all Tom could afford on his $1,800 a month pension. The medical bills from Sarah's illness had left him $45,000 in debt, a number that hung around his neck like an anchor. He'd learned to eat 1 meal a day, usually whatever was cheapest at the grocery store. Ramen noodles, day-old bread, sometimes just black coffee and whatever leftovers he could stretch across 3 days. The money he saved went to Ranger, $300 a month for the German shepherd's medications, the pills that kept his hip dysplasia manageable, that let him move without too much pain. Tom would starve before he'd let Ranger suffer. The dog had given him 9 years of loyal service in the Miami-Dade Police Department, 7 of those years tracking criminals through the worst neighborhoods in Florida, sniffing out drugs and taking down suspects twice his size. When Tom retired 3 years ago, the department had let him adopt Ranger, who was being retired early for reasons the brass never fully explained. Now they were both old men, in a way. Ranger's black and tan coat had gone silver around his muzzle. He limped when he walked, especially in the mornings, but his eyes were still sharp, still intelligent, still watching Tom with an intensity that sometimes felt like the dog could see straight into his soul, and maybe he could. Maybe Ranger knew things that Tom tried to hide even from himself, like how many times Tom had stood in the bathroom with a bottle of pills in his hand, wondering if tonight was the night he'd finally take enough to not wake up. Each time, Ranger had appeared in the doorway, as if summoned by some sixth sense. The dog would knock the pills from Tom's hand with his nose, then sit and stare until Tom put the bottle away. They saved each other, in their way. Tom gave Ranger a home. Ranger gave Tom a reason to open his eyes every morning. It wasn't much of a life, but it was theirs. Just the two of them, in a house that barely stood, in a town that barely remembered them, watching the days pass like water down a slow drain. The morning had started like any other. Tom woke at 6, made coffee in the old percolator that had been Sarah's, and poured kibble into Ranger's bowl. They ate in companionable silence, the kind that comes from years of knowing someone so well that words become unnecessary. Then they headed out for their daily walk along the Bayou Trail, a routine so sacred that Tom couldn't remember the last time they'd missed it. But this morning, Ranger had other plans. Instead of following their usual route along the water's edge, the dog pulled hard toward the old cemetery, the one that locals avoided, the one surrounded by Spanish moss and rumors of bad things happening in the darkness. Tom tried to redirect him. "Not today, boy. That place gives me the creeps." But Ranger wouldn't budge. He planted his feet and stared at Tom with those brown eyes that somehow managed to look both pleading and insistent. It was unusual. Ranger always obeyed, always. In 9 years, Tom couldn't remember a single time the dog had refused a command. Something in that stare made Tom relent. All right. We'll go your way today." They turned off the main trail and pushed through the undergrowth toward the cemetery. The air grew thicker, heavier as they walked. The morning sun barely penetrated the canopy of cypress trees above them. 50 yards in, Ranger suddenly stopped and began pawing at the ground near a crumbling headstone. Tom's first thought was that the dog had found an animal carcass, maybe a possum or a raccoon. But then he saw it, a purse, lying in the mud, partially hidden by leaves. Tom knelt and picked it up, his old instincts as a detective kicking in immediately. The purse wasn't old or weathered. It was recent, fresh. He opened it carefully, using just his fingertips, the way he'd been trained decades ago. Inside was a wallet, and inside the wallet was a driver's license. Claire Parker, age 35. The photo showed a woman with kind eyes and blonde hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. There was another photo tucked behind the license, this one showing Claire with a young girl, maybe 8 years old, both of them smiling at a birthday party. Tom's hands began to shake. He looked around the clearing and saw what he'd missed before. Tire tracks in the soft earth, signs of a struggle, footprints that dragged and skidded, and Claire's phone, lying face down in the mud, its screen cracked but still glowing. He picked it up. The screen showed a text message, half written, never sent. "Found something in patient records. Meeting tonight to discuss. If anything happens to me," the message cut off there. Tom stood up fast, his heart hammering in his chest. He knew what this meant. Someone had taken her. Recently. Maybe as recently as last night. He pulled out his own phone and dialed 911 with fingers that didn't want to cooperate. "This is Thomas Sullivan, retired detective sergeant," he said when the dispatcher answered. "I'm at the old Cypress Cemetery off Route 12. I found evidence of a possible kidnapping. A woman named Claire Parker. I need units here now." There was a pause. Then the dispatcher's voice came back apologetic and harried. "Mr. Sullivan, we've got all available units on hurricane evacuation. There's a major storm coming in. I can get someone out there in about 45 minutes. Can you secure the scene and wait?" 45 minutes. Tom looked down at the photo of the little girl again, the one with the gap-toothed smile. He thought about another little girl, 3 years ago, one of 5 people who had died while Tom was being pulled from the water instead of chasing the criminals. 45 minutes hadn't been fast enough then. It wouldn't be fast enough now. Tom stared at the phone in his hand for a long moment after the dispatcher hung up. 45 minutes. He looked down at Ranger, who was already moving, nose to the ground, tracking a scent that Tom's human senses couldn't detect. The dog glanced back at him with an expression that seemed to say, "Are we doing this or not?" Tom made his decision. He couldn't wait. Not again. Not this time. He jogged back to his truck, parked on the access road, and grabbed his old duty belt from behind the seat. He'd kept it all these years, telling himself it was just nostalgia, but maybe part of him had always known he'd need it again. He strapped it on, feeling the familiar weight of the flashlight, the first aid kit, the backup phone battery. No gun. He'd turned that in when he retired, but it would have to do. "All right, boy," he said to Ranger. "Let's find her." They moved deeper into the bayou, following a trail that only Ranger could sense. The dog worked methodically, the way he'd been trained, pausing occasionally to recalibrate, then pressing forward with renewed certainty. Tom struggled to keep up. The terrain was rough, full of exposed roots and hidden pools of standing water. His knees ached. His breathing came hard. He was 68 years old and feeling every year of it. But he pushed on, driven by the memory of that little girl's smile in the photograph and by the faces of 5 other victims he'd failed to save 3 years ago. They passed an old boat launch, long abandoned, its wooden planks rotted through. Then a collapsed fisherman's shack, its roof caved in and walls leaning at impossible angles. The air began to smell strange here, a chemical scent that didn't belong in nature, antiseptic almost, like a hospital. Tom filed that detail away in the back of his mind. After nearly 4 hours of tracking, rangers stopped at what looked like nothing more than an overgrown path, barely visible beneath the undergrowth. But the dog was certain. He sat and looked at Tom, waiting for the command to proceed. Tom crouched beside him and peered ahead. Through the trees, maybe 100 yards distant, he could see a structure, a small wooden cabin partially obscured by hanging moss and thick vegetation, and he could hear something. The low hum of a generator. Someone was there. Right now. Tom's heart rate kicked up. He moved forward cautiously, keeping low, placing each foot carefully to avoid snapping twigs or rustling leaves. Ranger moved beside him in perfect heel position, silent as a ghost. All those years of training hadn't faded. They reached the cabin, and Tom crept up to a dirty window, cupping his hands around his eyes to see inside. Claire Parker was there, tied to a chair in the center of the room. Her head was slumped forward, unconscious but breathing. Tom felt a rush of relief. She was alive. But then a figure moved into his line of sight, and Tom's blood turned to ice. He knew that man, knew him well. Danny Carter, former colleague, former friend. The man Tom had investigated 8 years ago for corruption. The man whose testimony Tom had given that resulted in Danny being fired from the force. Tom hadn't seen him since the trial. He'd heard Danny had gone to prison for a while, but that had been years ago. What the hell was he doing here, and why did he have Claire Parker? But even as Tom asked himself the question, pieces began falling into place. Danny had been involved in the trafficking case 3 years ago. Tom hadn't known it at the time, but looking back now, it made terrible sense. And if Danny was involved in trafficking and Claire had written about finding something in patient records, then this wasn't just about revenge. This was about Claire discovering something she shouldn't have. Tom was about to back away, to find cover and figure out his next move, when Danny turned and looked directly at the window. Their eyes met. For a split second, neither man moved. Then Danny smiled. It was a cold smile, empty of humor or warmth. He walked toward the door. Tom straightened up, his hand instinctively going to his belt where a gun should have been, but wasn't. Ranger pressed against his leg, a low growl building in the dog's chest. The cabin door opened and Danny stepped out, a pistol held loosely in his right hand. He looked older than Tom remembered, thinner. There was a hardness in his eyes that hadn't been there before, a kind of desperate exhaustion that Tom recognized because he saw it in his own mirror every morning. "Hello, Tom," Danny said quietly. "Been a long time. I was wondering when you'd show up." "Actually, I've been counting on it." He raised the gun, not quite pointing it at Tom yet, but making his intentions clear. "We need to talk about choices, about consequences, about what it feels like when everything you love gets taken away." Tom raised his hand slowly, showing he was unarmed. "Danny, whatever this is, we can talk about it. Let Claire go. She's got nothing to do with what happened between us." Danny laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Nothing to do with it, Tom. She's got everything to do with it. But you're right about one thing. We should talk." He gestured with the gun toward the bayou. "Walk, that way, nice and slow." Tom glanced at Ranger, who was rigid with tension, every muscle coiled and ready. "Easy, boy," Tom murmured. The last thing he needed was for Ranger to attack and get shot. They walked, Danny behind them, until they reached a small dock that extended out over dark water. The bayou here was deep and still, its surface broken only by the occasional ripple of something moving beneath. "You remember 3 years ago?" Danny asked, his voice tight. "That trafficking case you were so proud of closing?" "I remember," Tom said carefully. He remembered everything about that case, how he'd fallen into the water during the chase, how his partner had jumped in to save him instead of pursuing the suspects, how 2 days later they'd found 5 bodies, 3 women, 2 children, all dead because Tom hadn't been fast enough, because he'd needed saving instead of doing the saving. "My daughter was one of those 5, Danny said, and Tom felt the words hit him like a physical blow. "Did you know that? Did you even bother to check the names of the victims, to follow up with the families?" Tom's mind raced back. He'd read the reports, seen the photos, but he'd never connected the dots, never realized that one of those children belonged to someone he knew. "Danny, I didn't know. God, I'm so sorry." "Sorry," Danny repeated. "You're sorry. Well, that's real nice, Tom. Real comforting." His voice cracked. "Her name was Emily. She was 12 years old. And while you were being pulled out of the water like some kind of damsel in distress, she was drowning. They found her with her hands still tied. Do you know what that means? Do you understand what her last moments must have been like?" Tom did know. He'd spent 3 years imagining it, tormenting himself with exactly those images. "Danny, listen to me." "No, you listen." Danny cut him off. "After Emily died, after you closed your case and got your commendation and went on with your life, mine fell apart. My wife left me. Said she couldn't stand to look at me anymore. I started drinking, lost my pension appeal, lost everything. And then these people found me. The same organization you were supposed to stop. They offered me work. They had leverage, see? Something I did during my PTSD, something I never reported. They said work for us or go to prison for murder. So I did. I worked for them. I helped them do the same thing that killed my daughter because I was too weak and too broken to do anything else." Tom felt something shift in his understanding. This wasn't just about revenge. This was about a man who'd been destroyed by grief and guilt, who'd been twisted into something he never wanted to be. "Danny, it doesn't have to be like this. We can fix. Danny's voice rose. "How do we fix Emily being dead? How do we fix the fact that I've become the monster that killed her?" He steadied the gun. "But I can fix one thing. I can make you understand what it feels like. To be helpless, to have to choose, to lose everything that matters." He forced Tom closer to the edge of the dock. "You fell in the water 3 years ago. Your partner saved you instead of chasing us. 5 people died because of that choice. My daughter died because of that choice. Now you're going to make a choice too." He glanced back toward the cabin. "Jump in this water right now and I let Claire live. She goes home to her family. But if you refuse, if you stay on this dock, I walk back there and put a bullet in her head. You've got 10 seconds to decide." Tom's mouth went dry. He looked down at the dark water and felt his PTSD rising like a wave. He couldn't go in there. His body wouldn't let him. Even thinking about it made his chest tighten, made his lungs feel like they were already full of water. "Danny, please." 10, 9, 8, Ranger growled, sensing Tom's terror. The dog moved slightly forward, positioning himself between Tom and Danny. 7, 6, 5. Tom's hands were shaking. He looked at the water and saw Sarah's face beneath the surface, the way she'd looked in those final moments when her lungs had filled with fluid and there was nothing he could do. He heard the little girl in the photograph laughing, heard Emily's voice, though he'd never actually heard it. "Wait, just wait a second. 4. And 3. Tom stepped toward the edge of the dock. His legs felt like they belonged to someone else. Okay, Danny, I'll do it. Just don't hurt her. Please don't hurt her." "Good," Danny said. "See how easy that was? Now," but he never finished the sentence. Ranger, who had been trained for 7 years to apprehend suspects, who had taken down armed men twice his size, who had never forgotten a single command despite being retired for 3 years, lunged. He moved like lightning, crossing the space between them before Danny could react. His jaws closed on Danny's gun arm, and he bit down hard, the way he'd been trained to do, targeting the weapon. The gun went off. The bullet went wide, disappearing into the trees. Tom shouted, "Ranger, no!" But the dog was already in full apprehension mode, shaking his head violently, trying to make Danny drop the gun. Danny screamed and kicked out hard, catching Ranger in the ribs. The dog yelped but didn't let go. Danny kicked again, this time connecting with Ranger's injured hip. The old injury flared, and Ranger's grip loosened just enough. Danny twisted and shoved the dog away with his free hand, then turned and kicked Tom hard in the chest. Tom stumbled backward. His foot found nothing but air. For a moment he was suspended, arms windmilling, and then he was falling. He hit the water hard, the impact driving the air from his lungs. Cold and dark closed over his head. He went under, panic exploding in his mind like a bomb. He was back in the water 3 years ago. He was watching Sarah drown in the bathtub. He was drowning himself, his lungs burning, his arms and legs tangled in some invisible net. He couldn't swim, couldn't think, could only sink, thrashing uselessly as the dark water pulled him down. Somewhere above him, he heard another splash. Then something grabbed his collar, teeth in fabric, pulling upward. Ranger, the dog, had jumped in after him. Tom felt himself being dragged toward the surface. His head broke through and he gasped, coughing, choking on bayou water that tasted of rot and chemicals. But the current was strong here, pulling them away from the dock, away from shore. Tom tried to help, tried to kick and paddle, but his body wouldn't cooperate. His PTSD had him in its grip, and all he could do was struggle and swallow more water. Ranger swam hard, his powerful legs churning, but Tom's weight and the current were too much. They were being swept downstream into deeper, darker water, and then Tom saw them. 4 sets of eyes breaking the surface. Alligators, drawn by the splashing, by the scent of blood from where Danny had kicked Ranger, by movements that looked like prey in distress. They were 50 feet away, then 40. Then 30, and they were closing in fast. On the dock behind them, Danny stood watching, his face twisted with something between satisfaction and horror. "Now you know," he shouted over the water. "Now you know how it feels." Tom's vision tunneled as he struggled in the water. The alligators were 20 feet away now, their prehistoric eyes fixed on him and Ranger with cold calculation. Ranger was swimming with everything he had, dragging Tom toward a fallen log about 60 feet distant, but they were making agonizingly slow progress. The current kept pushing them sideways, parallel to the shore rather than toward it. Tom could hear Ranger's breathing, labored and desperate, could feel the old dog's strength beginning to fail. The hip that had been injured years ago was giving out. Tom could feel it in the irregular jerking of Ranger's movements. "Let me go," Tom gasped, spitting out water. "Ranger, let me go. Save yourself." But the dog wouldn't release his grip on Tom's collar. If anything, he bit down harder, a low whine building in his throat that spoke of pain and determination in equal measure. The closest alligator submerged. Tom lost sight of it beneath the murky water and felt pure terror course through him. They attacked from below. He knew that. Everyone who lived in Louisiana knew that. The waiting was somehow worse than the attack itself. 5 seconds passed. 10. Where was it? Then he felt something brush against his leg beneath the water, and he jerked reflexively, pulling Ranger off balance. They both went under for 2 seconds that felt like an eternity. When they resurfaced, Tom was coughing violently, and Ranger was struggling to keep both their heads above water. Then the alligator rose directly beneath Ranger, its massive jaws opening. Ranger saw it at the last possible second and twisted in the water, his years of training giving him reflexes that age and injury hadn't quite stolen. The jaws snapped shut, missing by inches, but the creature's tail whipped around and struck Ranger's side. The impact was tremendous. Ranger let out a yelp that tore at Tom's heart. A sound of pure pain that no dog should ever have to make. Something broke inside Tom when he heard that sound. The PTSD that had paralyzed him, the fear that had made him helpless, all of it vanished in a white-hot flood of rage. This dog, this loyal companion who had saved his life more times than he could count, who had kept him from putting a bullet in his own head, who had given him a reason to wake up every morning for 3 years, was being hurt, and Tom would be damned if he was going to let that happen. He straightened in the water, treading as best he could, and when the alligator came around for another pass, Tom was ready. He remembered something from his training decades ago, something about alligators having sensitive snouts. When the creature lunged, Tom punched it as hard as he could right on the tip of its nose. His fist connected with surprising force, and the alligator recoiled, confused. Humans weren't supposed to fight back. Humans were supposed to be prey. The creature submerged again, repositioning. Those precious seconds allowed Tom and Ranger to make another 10 feet of progress toward the fallen log. 40 feet away now, Ranger was swimming with visible effort, his breathing coming in short, sharp pants. Tom could see blood in the water around them, a red tint that was spreading. The tail strike had opened a gash on Ranger's side, not deep, but bleeding steadily. And blood in the water meant more alligators would come, 25 feet from the log. Then a second alligator made its move, coming fast from the left side. Tom didn't see it, but Ranger did. The dog released Tom's collar for just a second, swam directly into the alligator's path, and intercepted it. He put himself between the predator and Tom, the same protective instinct that had driven his entire career in law enforcement. The alligator's jaws closed on Ranger's left hind leg. Ranger screamed. There was no other word for it. It was a sound of agony that carried across the water and into the trees beyond. The alligator began its death roll, spinning in the water to disorient and drown its prey. Ranger was pulled under, the water churning red and violent. Tom's vision went white. He didn't think. He dove down into the murky water, hands outstretched, feeling blindly in the darkness. His fingers found Ranger's body, found the alligator's head. He remembered another weak point, the eyes. He jammed his thumbs into where he thought the eyes would be and pushed with all the strength he had left. The alligator released Ranger reflexively, instinct overriding its feeding behavior. Tom grabbed Ranger's collar and kicked toward the surface. They broke through together, both gasping. Ranger's left hind leg was badly injured, deep puncture wounds visible even through his dark fur. The dog could barely paddle now, managing only weak movements with his 3 remaining functional legs. Tom wrapped his arm around Ranger's chest and began swimming for both of them, their roles suddenly reversed. The dog who had been saving him was now depending on him for salvation. 15 feet from the log, Tom's arms burned. His legs felt like lead. The current pulled at them relentlessly. Behind them, all 4 alligators were regrouping, circling now at about 25 feet. They sensed weakness, smelled blood. It was only a matter of time before they attacked again, 10 feet. Tom's lungs were screaming. Ranger was barely conscious now, his head lolling, his eyes half closed. "Stay with me, boy," Tom gasped. "Just a little further. Just a little bit further." And then he heard it. A voice from the shore. Tom, grab the rope." Tom looked up through eyes blurred with water and exhaustion. Danny Carter was standing on the muddy bank about 10 feet above the water level. He was holding a length of rope, swinging it like he was preparing to throw. His face was twisted with emotion, tears streaming down his cheeks. "Grab it!" Danny shouted again. "I'm pulling you out, both of you." Tom stared, not understanding. Danny had pushed him into this water. Danny had wanted him to feel helpless, to watch someone he loved die. Why would he help now? "Because I can't watch another person die because of me," Danny screamed, as if reading Tom's thoughts. "Grab the damn rope." He threw it. The rope landed in the water about 5 feet from Tom. Tom lunged for it with his free hand, his other arm still wrapped around Ranger's chest. His fingers closed around the rough hemp. Behind him, he heard the water surge as the alligators made their final rush. Danny began to pull, his face contorted with effort, hauling them toward shore with desperate strength. The closest alligator lunged, jaws opening wide, aiming for Tom's trailing legs. It was 3 feet away, 2 feet. Danny pulled harder, muscles straining. Tom and Ranger shot forward through the water. The alligator's jaws snapped closed on nothing but water where Tom's foot had been 1 second earlier. Danny dragged them up onto the muddy bank, and they collapsed there, heaving and coughing. Tom didn't let go of Ranger. He couldn't. His arms were locked around the dog's body, as if releasing him might mean losing him forever. Ranger was whimpering softly, a sound that cut through Tom like broken glass. The dog's left hind leg was mangled, blood seeping through the dark fur, pooling in the mud beneath them. "Good boy," Tom sobbed, pressing his face against Ranger's wet head. "My good boy, stay with me. Please stay with me." But even as he said it, he could feel Ranger's body going limp in his arms, could feel the dog's breathing becoming shallow and irregular. Danny stood over them, the gun hanging loose in his hand, shaking. He was crying openly now, his face twisted with anguish. "I'm sorry," he kept saying. I'm sorry. I didn't mean for this to happen. I just wanted you to understand. I just wanted—" "Shut up," Tom said, but there was no anger in his voice. Just exhaustion. He looked up at Danny with eyes that held nothing but emptiness. "If you're going to shoot me, but let me save my dog first." Danny stared at him. Then, slowly, he dropped to his knees in the mud. The gun fell from his hand. He put his face in his hands and wept like a broken man, like someone who had been carrying an impossible weight for too long and had finally collapsed under it. "I'm sorry," Danny whispered through his fingers. "God, Tom, I'm so sorry. I didn't know what else to do. After Emily died, after everything fell apart, I wanted someone to hurt the way I was hurting. I wanted you to feel what I felt." Tom was barely listening. He was focused on Ranger, on trying to slow the bleeding from the dog's leg, using his shirt as a makeshift bandage. His hands were shaking so badly he could hardly tie the knot. "We need to get him to a vet," he said. "Now. Right now, or he's going to die." "They'll kill us," Danny said, looking up. His face was pale, haunted. "The people I work for, the trafficking ring. If Claire talks, if I let her go, they'll kill all of us. They'll kill me, they'll kill you, they'll kill Claire. They have eyes everywhere." "Then we take them down," Tom said, still working on Ranger's bandage. "All of them. You give me names, evidence, everything you know, and we end this." "Why would you trust me?" Danny asked, his voice breaking. "After what I just did to you?" Tom finally looked at him directly. "Because you pulled us out of that water. You chose to save us when you could have let us die. That has to count for something." He paused. "And because I understand what you've been through. I see their faces too, Danny. Every night. The 5 victims, your Emily, my Sarah. I know what it's like to live with that guilt." "Your wife died of cancer," Danny said, confused. Tom's face hardened. "That's what I thought too. For 5 years, that's what I thought." He carefully lifted Ranger into his arms, the dog's weight feeling impossibly heavy. "Last week, I broke into the hospital archives, found Sarah's real medical records, the ones that were sealed." His voice cracked. "She didn't die of cancer, Danny. Someone at Cypress General gave her the wrong medications, deliberately, to speed up her death, so they could harvest her organs." Danny's face went white. "Oh God, Tom. The same trafficking ring you're working for has been operating for 8 years. Sarah died 5 years ago." Tom looked Danny straight in the eye. "Your people killed my wife, and Claire was going to expose them. That's why you were ordered to take her." The truth hung between them like a physical thing. Danny began shaking his head slowly, horror dawning across his features. No, I didn't know. They told me she was a security threat. I didn't know she was trying to stop them." "I didn't know about your wife. Tom, I swear I didn't know." "I believe you," Tom said quietly. "You became what destroyed your daughter because you were broken and desperate, and they took advantage of that. But it ends now." They stumbled back toward the cabin, Tom carrying Ranger's limp body. Danny supporting them both. Inside, Claire was stirring, her eyes fluttering open as they entered. When she saw Danny, she screamed and tried to pull away, but the ropes held her fast. "It's okay," Tom said quickly, setting Ranger down gently on the floor before moving to untie her. "You're safe. He's not going to hurt you." Claire's eyes were wild with fear and confusion. "He kidnapped me. He was going to kill me." "I know," Tom said, working at the knots. "But things have changed. We're all on the same side now." He got the ropes loose, and Claire immediately pulled away, pressing herself against the far wall, as far from Danny as she could get. "Who are you?" she demanded, looking at Tom. "My name is Tom Sullivan. I'm a retired police officer. I found your purse in the cemetery this morning. Your phone. The message you were trying to send about patient records." The ropes came free, and Claire rubbed her wrists, her eyes never leaving Danny. "You were investigating something at the hospital, weren't you? Something to do with missing patients?" Claire nodded slowly, still wary. "Elderly patients who died of natural causes, except the pattern was wrong. Too many dying right after their organs were typed. And then I started looking into veterans, young men with PTSD who supposedly killed themselves." Her voice broke. "My son was one of them, 2 years ago. Michael Parker. They told me he shot himself in my garage." Tears started streaming down her face. "But I never believed it. Michael had problems, yes, but he was getting better. He was fighting. He wouldn't have given up." Tom felt like he'd been punched in the chest. "Michael Parker was your son?" Claire looked at him in surprise. "You knew him?" "I trained him," Tom said quietly, "before he enlisted. He was a good kid, smart, dedicated. I lost touch when he deployed, but—" He trailed off, the weight of yet another failure settling on his shoulders. "I didn't know he'd come back with PTSD. I didn't know he needed help." "He talked about you," Claire said, her voice softening slightly despite her fear. "He said you taught him what it meant to serve." She looked down at her hands. "The VA failed him. The system failed him. And then someone at the hospital marked him as high risk and made sure that risk became reality. Danny, who had been silent this whole time, spoke up. His voice was hollow. "My daughter was a nurse at the VA. She found something, documents about the ring. They killed her and made it look like she was a victim of human trafficking to throw off any investigation." He looked at Claire. "Your son, my daughter. We're all victims of the same people." The cabin fell silent except for Ranger's labored breathing. Tom knelt beside the dog again, checking his makeshift bandage. It was already soaked through with blood. "We need to get him to a vet right now, or he's going to die, and we need to get to the authorities. All of us. Together." "There's a vet in town," Claire said, still keeping her distance from Danny. "Dr. Helen Martinez. She's been helping me. She knows about the ring. She's been gathering evidence too." "Then that's where we go," Tom said, carefully lifting Ranger again. The dog's eyes opened briefly, found Tom's face, and something like trust passed between them before the eyes closed again. They loaded into Danny's truck, Claire in the front passenger seat as far from Danny as possible, Tom in the back cradling Ranger. The drive into town should have taken 45 minutes on the back roads, but they'd barely made it 10 minutes when Danny's eyes flicked to the rearview mirror and his face went pale. "We've got company," he said. Tom turned to look through the back window. A black SUV was behind them, closing fast. "The ring?" "Yeah." Danny's hands tightened on the wheel. "They know Claire escaped. They probably have someone watching the roads." The SUV accelerated, pulling up alongside them. Tom saw the passenger window roll down, saw the gun barrel emerge. "Get down!" he shouted, throwing himself over Ranger's body as the rear window exploded in a spray of glass. Claire screamed. Danny swerved hard, the truck fishtailing on the wet road. Hurricane winds were picking up now, rain starting to pelt the windshield. "Hold on!" Danny shouted, and took a sharp turn onto an even narrower road. The SUV followed. They were doing 70 now on a road meant for 30. Trees whipped past in a blur. Another shot rang out, this one taking out the driver's side mirror. Tom looked down at Ranger. The dog wasn't moving. The stress and blood loss had pushed him into unconsciousness, or worse. "Faster, Danny. I'm trying." The truck hit a pothole and went airborne for a second before crashing back down. Claire was gripping the dashboard, her knuckles white. Danny made a desperate decision. Up ahead was an old bridge over the bayou, wooden and condemned, blocked by a rusted chain. He drove straight through the chain and onto the bridge. The planks groaned under the truck's weight. Several snapped, falling away into the dark water below. The SUV followed them onto the bridge. Halfway across, the ancient structure began to fail. Wood splintered and shrieked. Danny floored the accelerator. The truck lurched forward, tires scrambling for purchase on rotting boards. They made it to the far side, just as the middle section of the bridge collapsed. The SUV wasn't as lucky. Its front tires broke through and the vehicle pitched forward, nose down, then crashed through completely, tumbling into the bayou with a tremendous splash. Danny didn't stop. He kept driving until they were a mile away, then finally pulled over, all of them breathing hard. Tom looked down at Ranger in his lap. The dog wasn't breathing. No, 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 no. He laid Ranger out flat on the truck bed and began chest compressions, the same way he'd been trained decades ago, pushing down rhythmically on the dog's ribcage. "Come on, boy, come on. Don't you dare leave me." Claire climbed into the back, pressed her fingers to Ranger's neck, searching for a pulse. "Tom." Her voice was gentle but firm. "No," Tom said, continuing the compressions. 30 of them. Then he leaned down and breathed into Ranger's nose, sealing the dog's mouth with his hand. "He's not dead. He's not." Another 30 compressions. Another breath. Nothing. Ranger's body remained limp and still. A minute passed. Then another. Tom's arms were shaking with exhaustion, but he wouldn't stop. "I'm not giving up on him," he said through gritted teeth. "He never gave up on me." Danny stood beside the truck, tears streaming down his face. "Tom, we have to go. The storm is getting worse. If we don't get to town—" "I'm not leaving him." Tom's voice broke into a sob. He stopped the compressions and laid his head on Ranger's chest, listening for a heartbeat he couldn't find. "I'm sorry, boy. I'm so sorry. This is my fault. All of it is my fault." Claire reached back and put a hand on Tom's shoulder. "Tom, if we don't get to Dr. Martinez's clinic, if we don't expose the ring, then Ranger's sacrifice means nothing. He saved us so we could finish this. Don't let him down." Tom raised his head. His face was streaked with tears and bayou water. "He didn't save us to die," he whispered. "He saved us so we could live. Together. That was the deal. That was always the deal." But Ranger wasn't moving, wasn't breathing. The dog who had been his partner, his friend, his reason for living, was gone. Tom carefully lifted Ranger's body and laid him in the truck bed, covering him with a tarp they found behind the seats. His hands were shaking so badly he could barely tuck the edges in. "I'll come back for you," he whispered, his voice breaking. "I swear it, boy. I'll come back." They drove away, Tom watching through the rear window as the covered form of his best friend disappeared into the rain. Inside his chest, something fundamental had broken. Everyone he loved died. Sarah, the 5 victims, Michael, and now Ranger. Maybe Danny had been right all along. Maybe Tom was the curse. Maybe everyone who got close to him was doomed. They arrived at Dr. Martinez's veterinary clinic as the hurricane winds began to howl in earnest. The small building stood on the edge of Cypress Bend, its lights glowing warm against the darkening afternoon sky. Tom stumbled out of the truck first, moving like a man in a dream. His clothes were still soaked, his hands still shaking. Danny and Claire followed, supporting each other. The door burst open before they could knock. Dr. Helen Martinez stood there, a woman in her mid-50s with kind eyes that widened in shock when she saw them. "Claire, oh my God, you're alive." She pulled Claire into a hug, then noticed Danny, and her hand went immediately to the phone on the wall. "I'm calling the police." "Wait," Claire said, grabbing her arm. "It's complicated. He's with us now. He's helping us." Helen looked skeptical but lowered her hand from the phone. Then she noticed Tom standing there, empty-handed, his face utterly vacant. "Tom, where's Ranger?" "I always see you two together at the park every week." Tom's voice came out flat, emotionless. "He's gone. He died saving us from alligators." Helen's face crumpled with genuine grief. "Oh, Tom, I'm so sorry." She reached for him, but he pulled back slightly, unable to accept comfort he didn't feel he deserved. They moved inside and the story spilled out. The trafficking ring, the organ harvesting, Sarah's murder disguised as cancer, Michael's suicide that wasn't a suicide, Danny's daughter Emily, who had been killed for discovering the truth, Claire's investigation that had nearly gotten her killed, and Ranger, faithful Ranger, who had given everything to save a man who couldn't save himself. Helen listened, her face growing graver with each revelation. When they finished, she picked up the phone. "My sister is an FBI agent in Baton Rouge, Agent Maria Santos. She's been wanting to investigate the hospital administrator, Dr. Richard Westbrook, for years but never had enough evidence." She made the call, explaining the situation in quick, efficient sentences. When she hung up, her expression was troubled. "Maria says she can have a team here in 2 hours, but with the hurricane, they might not make it. The roads are already flooding." "We can't wait," Danny said, his voice urgent. "Westbrook will know by now that Claire escaped, that I've turned. He'll be destroying evidence, preparing to run. If we don't move now—" Tom, who had been sitting silently in the corner holding Ranger's old collar, finally spoke. "We need to get the evidence Claire mentioned, the USB drive hidden in her apartment." "We can't," Danny said. "They'll be watching her place." "Then I'll go," Tom said, standing up. His voice was dead, empty of everything except a cold determination. "I've got nothing left to lose." "Tom, that's suicide," Helen protested. "Good." The word hung in the air like a death sentence. Tom looked at them with eyes that had stopped caring about survival. "My wife is dead. My dog is dead. Everyone I've ever tried to protect ends up dead. At least this way my death will mean something." Claire stepped forward, her eyes fierce despite her exhaustion. "That's not true. You saved me today. Danny saved all of us. We're alive because of what you both did." She paused. "And Michael thought the world of you. He told me once that you taught him the most important lesson of his life. That service means sacrifice, but sacrifice should always have purpose." Tom's mask cracked slightly. What purpose did Ranger's sacrifice have? "He died in muddy water, torn apart by alligators, because I was too broken to save myself." "He died protecting someone he loved," Helen said softly. "There's no greater purpose than that. The question is, what are you going to do with the life he gave you?" Before Tom could answer, Danny's phone rang. He looked at the caller ID and went pale. "It's Westbrook." He looked at the others, uncertain. "Answer it," Tom said. "Put it on speaker." Danny answered, his hand trembling. Dr. Richard Westbrook's smooth, cultured voice filled the small clinic. "Danny, I'm disappointed. I thought you understood the consequences of betrayal." "Go to hell," Danny said, his voice stronger than his hands. "Perhaps," Westbrook replied calmly. "But first, I think you should know something. Your daughter, Emily, she's alive." The phone nearly slipped from Danny's grip. The world seemed to stop spinning. What did you say?" "Your daughter didn't die 3 years ago, Danny. The body you identified, the one you buried, that was a Jane Doe, a convenient substitute." Emily has been alive this whole time, kept in one of our facilities, healthy, useful. Leverage, you understand, in case you ever wavered. And here we are. Danny's legs gave out. He collapsed into a chair, his face white as paper, his whole body shaking. You're lying. This is a trick. No trick. I can prove it if you'd like. But here's what's going to happen. You have 1 hour. Bring me Claire Parker, alive. Bring me Thomas Sullivan, dead. And bring me every copy of the evidence. Do this, and I'll give you your daughter back. Refuse, and Emily dies. For real this time. The hurricane provides excellent cover for unfortunate accidents. The line went dead. The clinic fell into stunned silence. Claire spoke first, her voice gentle but firm. Danny, you can't trust him. He's lying about your daughter. He has to be. What if he's not? Danny's voice was wild, desperate. What if she's been alive all this time and I didn't know? What if I can save her? I have to try. I have to. Tom, who had been standing motionless, finally moved. He walked over to Danny and knelt down so they were eye level. Then we make the trade. My life for hers. Tom, no, Claire started. I'm serious, Tom interrupted. Trade me for Emily. I'm 68 years old. I've lost everyone who mattered. I'm ready to go, but she's 15. She deserves a chance to live. It's a fair trade. Helen grabbed his arm. That's not a trade, Tom. That's suicide. You know Westbrook will kill you both. Probably, Tom agreed. But there's a small chance he won't kill Emily. A small chance is better than no chance. He looked at Danny. You wanted me to understand what you felt, the helplessness. Well, now you can understand what I'm choosing. To die so someone else can live, like Ranger did, like Sarah would have wanted. Tom stood up, his decision made. For 3 years, I've been trying to die without actually doing it. Now I have a reason, a good reason, to mean something. One last time. What about the FBI? Helen asked. What about justice? FBI is 2 hours away. The hurricane is 1 hour away. We're out of time. Tom pulled something from his pocket. A small vial he'd palmed from Helen's medicine cabinet when no one was looking. Veterinary euthanasia drugs. His insurance policy. If things went wrong, he'd have control over how he died. Besides, Ranger taught me something today. Sometimes the most important thing isn't surviving. It's making sure the right people survive. The plan formed quickly. Danny would call Westbrook back and agree to the terms. The meeting place would be the old cemetery where everything had started. Tom would walk in alive, but they'd stage it to look like he'd been killed. Claire would be sedated to appear captured, but would actually be protected. Helen would make a copy of the evidence USB, hiding the original. When the exchange happened, if the FBI didn't arrive in time, Tom would improvise. What Tom didn't tell them was that he had no intention of surviving. The vial in his pocket was his exit strategy. Better to die on his own terms than let Westbrook's people torture him for information. Better to go out with one last act of meaning than to live another day in empty, purposeless grief. They drove back through the storm toward the cemetery. The hurricane was fully upon them now, rain hammering the windshield, wind rocking the truck. Trees bent nearly horizontal. Debris flew past. Danny drove while Tom lay in the back, playing dead, Claire beside him with her eyes closed, pretending unconsciousness but actually whispering to him, Tom, you don't have to do this. There's another way. There isn't, Tom whispered back, and even if there was, I don't want it. Ranger was the only thing keeping me here. Without him, I'm just an old man waiting to die anyway. At least this way, it counts for something. Ranger wouldn't want you to give up. Ranger isn't here to have an opinion. Tom's hand went to the dog's collar in his pocket, the metal tags cold against his fingers. I failed him, Claire, just like I failed Sarah and your son and Danny's daughter and those 5 victims. I'm tired of failing people. This is the one thing I can still do right. They arrived at the cemetery. Through the rain, Tom could see a black SUV, a tent canopy, and figures waiting beneath it. Danny parked 50 feet away and got out, his hands raised to show he was unarmed. Tom watched through slitted eyes, his heart pounding despite his resignation to death. Dr. Richard Westbrook stood under the canopy, immaculate even in the storm, his grey hair perfectly combed, his expensive suit somehow staying dry. And beside him, thin and bruised and terrified, but unmistakably alive, stood a teenage girl, Emily Carter, Danny's daughter. Tom heard Danny's gasp, heard him whisper "baby girl" in a voice broken with wonder and grief. It was real. Westbrook hadn't been lying. The exchange began. Danny dragged Tom's body from the truck, and Westbrook sent men to verify he was dead. Tom had slowed his heart rate through sheer force of will, an old meditation technique. The men checked and nodded. Dead. Then Danny presented Claire, unconscious, and finally the USB drive with the evidence. "Then we have a deal," Westbrook said smoothly. "Emily, go to your father." The girl ran. Father and daughter collided in an embrace of desperate love and relief. They were sobbing, clinging to each other. "Daddy, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." "Shh, baby. You're safe now. You're safe." It would have been beautiful if Westbrook hadn't pulled a gun and pointed it at Emily's head. "The drive, now, or she dies for real this time." And that's when Tom sat up in the truck bed, very much alive, and said, "Miss me?" If you've ever felt like life has taken more than it's given, this story is for you. Tom Sullivan had lost everything that mattered, his wife to a disease that turned out to be murder, his sense of purpose when he retired, and finally the loyal dog who'd been his only reason to wake up each morning. He was a man standing on the edge of giving up entirely, convinced that everyone he touched was cursed to suffer. But here's what Tom didn't understand until that moment in the cemetery. Love isn't measured by how long someone stays with us, but by what they're willing to sacrifice when it matters most. Ranger didn't die in vain. He died doing exactly what he was born to do, protecting the person he loved. And Tom's choice to trade his own life for a 15-year-old girl he'd never met wasn't despair. It was the opposite. It was finally understanding that meaning isn't found in avoiding pain, but in deciding that someone else's future matters more than your own past. Sometimes the bravest thing we can do is keep showing up, even when our hearts are shattered. Have you ever had a moment where you had to choose between giving up and pushing forward one more time? What helped you find the strength to continue when everything felt lost? Share your story in the comments below. Your words might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today.